A team that I think is going to kind of slowly move to the bottom of this division is the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yep.
Uh,
Hmm.
a few, I think, drafting mishaps uh, over the past few years. I know they're talking about separating from safety Jonathan Abrams. They let Trent Brown go to New England, or they traded him to New England, and they replaced him with Alex Leatherwood, the left tackle from Alabama, in the first round. And I like the Alex Leatherwood pick overall, but just not in the first round. Like if they got him in the second or third round at that value, I was like, okay, yeah, that is a good pick because I think he's a good tackle. To me, he might kick into guard just because he lacks athletically at the next level,
Yeah.
or maybe go to right tackle where you can kind of hide some of his athletic inefficiencies that were really shown at the Pro Bowl
Yeah.
or no, Pro Bowl, Senior Bowl. Uh, so for me, I think the Raiders' outlook is a little less bright than I guess the two teams that we've talked about so far.
Yeah. So I do agree with you on the overall pick of Alex Leatherwood. I think if it was the second round, I think then that would be a solid place
Hmm.
for him. But I will say one thing, just after doing some research, that Alex Leatherwood might be able to help replace. Because as you mentioned, they did lose Trent Brown. But with Josh Jacobs as a running back, he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. And Alex
Hmm.
Leatherwood was rated one of the better run blocking tackles in college. So
Yeah.
probably to replace that. I would need to look into. Oh, I guess I have my notes on Trent Brown, but if he can come in and then Josh Jacobs could still be a 1,000-yard rusher, if not more, then I think that would be a great. I think that would be just a solid addition to that offensive line, and then the pass blocking abilities can come, and hopefully the athleticism can increase to help protect Derek Carr. Because I think one of the things after with watching the Raiders is and watching John Gruden is he wants to have a balanced offense. So if you have a 1,000-yard rusher and then Derek Carr threw for over 4,000 yards last year, that's a pretty solid balance, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
so really, one of the biggest things actually for me, I think one of the big pieces that they lost was Nelson Aguilar, their receiver
Yeah.
one. So they do have Darren Waller, who did catch almost 1,200 yards last year and 9 touchdowns,
Yeah.
and was one of the leading tight ends in the league. But now I was looking at their depth chart, and there's some potential, a lot of opportunity for these guys to grow. But with Hunter Renfro and Henry Ruggs returning, between them, only had 1,000 yards receiving between those two guys. Nelson Aguilar, I
Yeah.
believe, was 800 or
It was like 860.
okay, yeah. So I mean that's still a solid receiver one, and they only brought in John Brown and Willie Snead, which are I think only had 900 yards between those two guys. So
Yeah.
that to me, actually, I think it might be a bigger piece because if those guys aren't able, and if they're not able to run a good system to get guys open and get John Brown and Willie Snead open as well to help
Yeah.
make up for that loss, that I actually think might be a bigger loss because you can only throw to Darren Waller so much, even though he is such an
Yeah.
absolute
And they
huge
do have another
target.
guy in Brian Edwards that is he's going into his second year, but he was a somewhat prominent target as a rookie. I
Hmm.
just I struggle to see his projection to really develop,
Hmm.
or I struggle to project his development really much more than what I guess he already had. He's kind of a bigger guy. He reminds me a lot of N'Keal Harry with the Patriots. Granted, he was a third round pick. N'Keal Harry was a first, and Brian Edwards has more production than N'Keal Harry in his rookie year than N'Keal Harry does
Hmm.
both his first 2 years. So there is a little bit of a difference there, I guess, at talent level.
Yeah.
But I struggle to see a guy that doesn't. He's just a good receiver. He has good hands, good route running, good speed. He's not like elite speed or has incredible hands, or he does the DeAndre Hopkins where he can contort his body. He's just a good possession receiver. And so that to me, I think they lack an elite weapon all around. One of the things too, so Henry Ruggs is a guy when he's healthy had a lot of yards. He battled injuries a lot last year, and I think offensively they'll figure it out. Like they'll be okay offensively. They're not going
Yeah.
to be what they were. I think they averaged 30 points a game on the offensive side of the
Yeah, they
ball
had one
last
of the more
year.
potent offenses last year, I feel like.
To me, defensively is where they're going to struggle.
Well, so they did add some good pieces up front.
Yeah.
Not drafting. Getting Yannick Ngakwe. I think I'm
Yep.
horrible with my pronunciation, so I apologize. And
Yeah.
Quinn Jefferson.
Yeah. Somebody made a comment about that.
Hmm? Yeah, someone did make a
Somebody,
comment about that, which they'll make fun of me. I can't help it.
yeah.
But between those two guys, they had 11 sacks last year in 2020. So that's going to add some good pressure. That's going to go well. I think that's going to be a very solid front four with them two, Klein Farrell and Max Crosby as well.
Yeah.
And they did also draft Malcolm Coens, another defensive end, which I
Hmm.
think might see some time pass rushing. But yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest question for me is going to be in the secondary. They had one of the weakest passing defenses last year, and they lost Lamarcus Joyner. Yeah, Lamarcus Joyner and
Yeah.
Eric Harris to the Falcons. We'll get to him in a couple episodes. They did draft Trayvon Morig out of TCU. I think that's going to be a nice addition to see him grow. Um,
Yeah.
but there's going to be a lot of competition, I think, in the secondary because it's just going to be interesting to
Mhm.
see who rises up, who's going to be the main cornerbacks for these guys, and that's where I think
Mhm.
if the defensive line can provide a lot of pressure, then that might not be a big deal. But if these
Yeah.
guys regress a little bit, or if they face some teams that have great offensive lines and can deal with the pressure and send out six receivers, that could be very difficult for this defense to stop the scoring points.
Yeah. No, definitely. And my kind of frame of mind on that is it's easier for a defensive line to cover up for a bad secondary than it is for a secondary to cover up for a bad defensive line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
if that defensive line can, like you said, can show through, it'll help that defense out a ton.
mm-hmm.
Um, but to kind of move on to kind of like their schedule, so I have them going 6-11. I think they're going to struggle this year. Uh, and to me, they start out really, really rough. So they start out playing Baltimore, and then they have to go to Pittsburgh, and then they play Miami, and then they have to go to the Chargers.
Yeah. That's a
That's
lot
a
of
pretty
traveling.
rough first 4 games. Even Wow, we don't think Pittsburgh's going to be that good. Even just having to go to Pittsburgh is a tough game.
Yeah,
Granted, they get it in September, early October. Uh, or so yeah, September. So they don't have to battle weather. It's still just a tough place to play.
yeah.
Uh, Go ahead.
But what I was going to say, but then so that's their first four games. So if they can come out there 2-2, even maybe 1-3,
Mhm.
I could see it. Then their next four games are the Bears at Broncos, Eagles at Giants, and they could. I could see a scenario where they come out at worst 3-1 um,
Mhm.
amongst those. So they could be battling around 500.
Wait, what you said at worst 3-1? You mean at best 3-1?
At best, three. Well, I would say at best they could win those first four games if the defensive troubles don't persist. The Bears, Eagles, and Giants are going to be weak teams this year, especially with the Eagles and the Giants. So, uh, but I do see what you're saying. I think I did uh, misspeak there. But
Mhm.
through those first 8 games, though, I could see them being around or slightly above 500,
Mhm.
which would put them in the hunt at that point of the season.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, I do agree with you and what you said at the beginning. I think they might regress though. That's the best
Mhm.
case scenario. And I don't know. It's just gonna be interesting to see how I guess this team adapts without really having
Yeah.
an elite receiver one to see who can come out and be that 1,000 yard receiver.
Yeah. And then also too, at the end of their schedule, they have a really tough ending last 5 games. So they have to go in week 14 to Kansas City, to Cleveland, and then they play Denver at home, and they have to go to Indianapolis and then play the Chargers at home.
Yeah,
That's that's a really tough last 5 games. Uh,
yeah.
I think at best they come out of that 2-3. I think they're not going to beat Kansas City at home. They're not going to beat Cleveland, uh,
I don't think they'll beat the Colts,
and I don't think they'll beat the Colts at home.
especially the Colts if they're projected as good as we say that they're going to be. Um,
Yeah,
if they're projected like that, they could be fighting for home field advantage, a bye.
yeah,
Uh, um, at minimum the division.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to be tough. That's what I'm saying. If they can start out hot, like let's say hypothetically at best, amongst those first 4 games, go 2-2, and then
Mhm.
go 3-1 over those next 4 games, and then that will put them at 5-3 halfway through the season.
Mhm.
It's not impossible, but yeah, with that stretch, they're going to have as many wins as possible going in before that final
Yeah,
5 weeks of the season.
Mhm. But all in all, I just don't expect the Chargers, the Raiders to
Mm-hmm.
be as competitive as I feel like their fans could hope. Uh, it's just kind of been a little, I guess, disappointing for Raiders fans,
Mm-hmm.
uh, especially when Derek Carr first came into the league. They were a 13-3 team one year, and then Derek Carr didn't even get a chance to make a playoff run because he broke his ankle
Yeah.
uh, in a late week game against the Colts. So uh, I hate to kick the Raiders fans while they're down, but I
Well,
just don't think that they're going to be as good.
it's kind of it's interesting, because like we just talked about the Chargers. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. See what we said.
Mhm.
But the they did have some other additions as well, similar to the Chargers on their offensive line, but it wasn't really anything that was spectacular. They have a pretty solid left tackle in Colton Miller. We already talked about Alex Leatherwood. Center is going to be a battle. It's going to be between Andre James, who hasn't been the best graded
Mhm.
offensive line, or Nick Martin, who just came from who they signed from Houston, who was the center over there and has been somewhat reliable, but does have his faults. So
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting to see how they develop. And if things click, because they were 30th overall in defense, and we did mention that, if the defensive line can improve and help out the secondary, then maybe I could see them winning. But I kind of see them actually being similar to what Denver was this year, like not the worst team in the league, somewhat competitive, but just not able to kind of really get out of their own way. I feel like.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. But anyways, I kind of want to wrap up on the Raiders and get to the last team.